Okay, so we are going to take a look at our density practice problems. Don't mind that I need to record this on my camera function on my laptop. We're making it work. Okay, so here's our first practice problem. I would put in your notebook examples, and this is number one. I would rewrite the problem as well. If you really don't want to, if you're feeling like you can probably handle this okay, then it's maybe not that big of a deal, but I would definitely recommend writing the problem just so that you can see kind of how we tear the problem apart as we solve it. So let's get started. I got my calculator ready to go. We will be using calculators for this, so feel free to have that ready to go. So a block of aluminum occupies a volume of 15 milliliters and has a mass of 40.5 grams. What is its density? And then it also asks whether it will sink or float in water. So the first thing that we want to do is figure out what variables we have. So the three variables that we could possibly have are density, mass, and volume. So I always write those off to the side. So it asks, what is its density? So I'm going to put a question mark there because we don't know the density. But it says we have a volume of 15.0 milliliters. I'm just going to leave off that 0.0 so that I don't have to type that into my calculator. So a volume of 15 milliliters. And then it says we have a mass of 40.5 grams. So there are our variables. Next thing we need to do is figure out which formula we use to solve this problem. So that's where that density triangle comes in. So I'm going to draw my triangle with a T in the middle. The M goes on the top, D and V goes there. So to use a density triangle, best thing to do is to figure out what you need to solve for. So in this case, we need to solve for density. Cover that up and see what's left over. So since I have M on top of V, that means my formula is going to be D equals M over V. D equals M over V. Okay. So let's go ahead and plug in the numbers that we've got and solve. So mass is 40.5 grams, and the volume is 15 milliliters. Okay, so there's our formula. Now all we need to do is actually do that math. So density equals, let's grab our calculator out here, 40.5 divided by 15, I get 2.7. Now we need to figure out what our units are, because we always need to have units in science. And the way we do that is we actually look at the units that we used up here. So if I have grams over milliliters up here, that's what's going to be my unit down here, grams per milliliter. So there's my final answer. The density of that block of aluminum is 2.7 grams per milliliter. Now it also asks, will it sink or float in water? Remember that if it is less dense than water, it will float. If it is more dense than water, it will sink. And water is 1 gram per milliliter. So since this is 2.7 grams per milliliter, this is going to sink in water because it has a higher density. Okay. Let's take a look then at problem number 2. So I would draw a line under this one. Here's our problem number 2. Rewrite it if you want. But we've got a 10 centimeter cubed sample of copper with a mass of 89.6 grams. And then it asks, what is the density of the copper? Will it sink or float in water? So again, we're going to start with our variables, density, mass, volume, figure out what we have and what we need to find. So it says, what is the density of copper? So we know that we're solving for density. 10 centimeters cubed. Centimeters cubed is our volume unit. So volume is 10 centimeters cubed. Again, that 0.0, I don't really need that. I'm just going to leave it off. And then our mass is 89.6 grams. Okay. Let's do our density triangle to be sure we're using the right formula. MdV. Okay. We need to solve for density, so I'm going to cover up the D, and I'm left with M over V. So D equals M over V. And we just need to plug in our numbers and solve. So density equals mass is 89.6 grams over our volume, which is 10 centimeters cubed. Okay, and then we just need to do that math. So let's grab our calculator. We've got 89.6 divided by 10 is 8.96. And then we need to find out what our unit is. We've got grams over centimeters cubed up here. So that's our unit, grams over centimeters cubed, or grams per centimeter cubed. Okay, there's a final answer. We've got 3 more problems that I want to go through. Oops, if I don't throw my pens all over the place. Okay, so starting off, finding what variables we have and what we need to solve for. V, N, and V. And remember, pause this anytime you need to catch up if you're getting left behind. Okay, so a sample of iron has the dimensions, I don't know, it has the same dimensions, the word same isn't necessary, has dimensions of 2 centimeters by 3 centimeters by 2 centimeters. So actually, you have to do some extra math here. If you remember, length equals, volume equals length times width times height. So really, we just need to multiply these together to find our volume. So our volume here, 2 times 3 times 2, length times width times height, is 12. So 12 centimeters cubed. Oops, sorry if that was kind of off the screen. 12 centimeters cubed is our volume. Okay. And it says the mass is 94 grams. So mass of 94 grams. And then it says, what is the density? So that's the one we're solving for. Again, make our density triangle. We probably know the formula for density by this point, but just to be sure, know that we need to find density. We cover up density in our triangle, and we're left with M over V. D equals M over V. Okay, let's plug in. D equals 94 grams. Oops. 94 grams over 12 centimeters cubed. Okay. Come on. Okay. 94 divided by 12 is, and we're just going to round that, we'll say 7.83. That'll do. 7.83. And what is our unit there? Oops, sorry, I'm kind of going off the screen there. 7.83. Looking at what units we used in the problem above, we had grams over centimeters cubed. So grams per centimeters cubed is our unit there. Okay. So we've done a lot of finding density problems, and we haven't used this triangle to find mass or volume. Let's do a couple of those. We'll do one of each. So I think this is number 4, right? Yep. So it says find the mass of 250 milliliters of benzene, and the density of benzene is 10 grams per milliliter. So we're given mass and we're given density. We need to find volume. Okay, so our variables, density is 10 grams per milliliter. And it says the mass is, find the mass. See, you got to be careful. Find the mass of 250 milliliters. Milliliters is a volume unit. So our volume is 250 milliliters. So we need to find our mass. Okay. So we need to figure out the formula. We can't use D equals M over V anymore because we're not solving for density this time. So let's do our density triangle. Remember, M goes up top, D and V. So we are finding the mass, so we're going to cover up the M, and we see that's what's left over is the D next to the V. Now remember, if something is on top of the other thing, like when we had density, M over V, that means divide. But since these two are next to each other, that means multiply. So mass equals density times volume. Okay, so mass equals 10 grams per milliliter times 250 milliliters. Let's do that math. 10 times 250. You can probably do that in your head even. Make sure I don't have a glare. 10 times 250 is 2,500. Multiplying by 10, just add a 0. 2,500. Okay. And what unit do we use? Well, this time we have a mass, and the only unit we ever use for mass is grams. Another way to think about it is we've got milliliter on the bottom of a fraction, and then essentially milliliter on the top of a fraction. They cancel out. That's kind of a little bit complicated, but anyway, we've got grams up here, and we are finding a mass, so our unit is grams. There we go. That's the best way to think about it, I think, is just what unit are we finding? We're finding mass. Our mass is always in grams. That's our unit. Okay, one more. Number 5, calculate what volume of silver metal has a mass of exactly 500 grams, and the density of silver is 10.5 grams per centimeter cubed. So density, mass, volume. What volume of silver metal, so we're finding volume this time, has a mass of exactly 500 grams. So mass is 500 grams, and the density is 10.5 grams per centimeter cubed. Okay, so there's all our variables. Again, we need to figure out what formula to use to solve for volume, right? So mass, density, volume. Since we are solving for volume, we're going to cover up the V in our triangle, and we're left with M over D. So our formula is going to be V equals M over D. M over D. Okay, so let's go ahead and plug in then. Volume equals 500 grams over our density of 10 grams per centimeter cubed. Okay, so there's our numbers. Let's go ahead and put that into a calculator. 500 divided by 10.5. And we will round that to 2 digits. So 47 point, we'll round that to 62. Okay, 47.62. That 1 will round up because of that 9. Okay, 47.62. And then what unit do we use? We've got gram on top of gram here. Those cancel out. We're left with just centimeters cubed. The other way, again, that you can think about this is we're solving for a volume. If we think about our two potential volume units, it's either milliliters or centimeters cubed. And since we used centimeters cubed here in our calculation, that's the unit that we're going to use here. So 47.62 centimeters cubed. There's your 5 example problems that go through a couple different versions excuse me, of these density problems. Hopefully those will be helpful for you. Hopefully you've got them all in your notebook. Yeah, ask me if you have any questions. And I think that it's time to start taking a look at your assignment for today to start working on some of this on your own. Good luck. Let me know if you need any help.